get it. Sorry. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but you've been driving around in a car and you're somewhat lost. Today it's more difficult to do because we all have GPS programs in our car, whether they're on our phones or already programmed into the computer systems of our car, but sometimes we choose not to use those because we say to ourselves, we know where we're going. And then you find yourself coming around the block again and you say to yourself, I think I've been here before. And then you have that sinking feeling in your stomach that in fact you're lost. And if you're a man, you don't admit it. If you're a woman, you've told us already many times. But this sense of being lost is one that leaves us with a terrible feeling. Until someone in the car will say, but we're on an adventure. Which is the way of trying to reorganize your thoughts so that you're not panicked, but you recognize that maybe you're going to have an opportunity to see things you never saw before. Maybe things you hadn't intended on seeing. And so what happens is you can turn your mindset from being upset, being anxious, to feeling as though there's a liberation in trying to figure it out and seeing what will come across on the way. When we're children, all we want to do is become a grown-up. And when we're a child, or when we're an adult, all we want to do is go back. Remember what it was like to be children. Getting from point A of childhood to adulthood, point B, is sometimes, often is a circuitous route in which we don't get directly from what we wanted to be as a child to becoming what we are as adults. So many of us were asked as young adults, what do you want to be when you grow up? And many of us have found a variety of different options on that path. And today, with the opportunity that never existed in human civilization before, we have an opportunity known as retirement, which never really existed before now, and the ability to amass wealth. And so people have the opportunity now in their lives at a later stage to say, what do I want to do now? What do I want to accomplish in my next stage? Because we recognize all along that life is a journey, it's not a destination. And figuring out what you're going to do now in this part of your life is critically important. We have a moment in this morning's Torah reading that would beg of us to think about God and what God believes with regards to humanity. It's different than what we normally do, and that is to try and figure out what God thinks, what God wants, what God does. There's an interesting moment in this morning's Parsha in which we get insight into what God thinks of us. So I share with you this piece of text. Vayehi Beshallah Paro et ha'am v'lo nacham Elohim derech eresh Plishtim. When Pharaoh finally let the Jewish people go, God did not lead them by the way of the Philistines. Ki karovu, because it was the shortest route. Ki amar Elohim pen yinachem ha'am bir'otam milchama v'shavu Mitzrayma. Because it's possible that faced with their first real challenge, the Jewish people will want to turn around and go home. Now, remember the map I shared with you earlier this morning. If you look at the route from Egypt to Israel, you'll see that the shortest distance between those two places is a straight line. But in fact, the Jewish people don't go that route because God says, I'm afraid if it's such a short route, as soon as they're facing adversity, they'll turn and want to go back. As if the Jewish people couldn't tell through the 40 years in the desert that we've been here before. We've come around this corner again. But there's something to be said about an emotional distance, a psychological distance that allows us to continue to progress even though we know intellectually we're very close. This morning's Parsha says, God imagines what humanity thinks and says, let me go a little longer. Let's take our time a little bit with this journey, because then we'll be able to figure it all out. You see, the truth is, we always say to ourselves, I wish I had known then what I know now. I wish as an adult I had as a child, I had all of the information that I have as an adult. What is the saying that is often said, that youth is wasted on the young? It's an expression that indicates that wouldn't it be great if we had all of the wisdom and insight that we have acquired over our lives, but we had it earlier on? Wouldn't that be great? And then wouldn't life be so much easier? Had I known then what I know now, means had I known then that all the pain and challenge and suffering that I went through would bring me to this moment, then it wouldn't have been so bad. I would have been able to endure it. Maybe I would have been able to embrace the moment and been able to experience life understanding that the end of the story is really, really good. That what we achieved and what we accomplished and what we acquired in relationship was well worth the steps it took to get us there. There's a wonderful statement in the Gemara in the Tractate of Erurim, and it says as following, Amar li zo k'tzara ve'aruka, v'zo aruka ve'k'tzara, v'halachti b'k'tzara ve'aruka kevan. There are some short ways and there are long ways. And sometimes when we take the shortcuts, we end up being lost and it turns out to be far longer. And sometimes when we take the long way, we find that we have acquired so much more than we ever could have imagined. So I say to you this morning, there are no shortcuts. When you try and cut corners in your life, what you're doing is you're missing out on opportunities. When you take the long way, sometimes it affords you opportunities you never could have imagined before. This morning, the Torah reading, through the words of God to Moses and the Jewish people, God says, let's take the long way and get to know each other. Let's take a drive in the country together. And then we'll establish a real relationship. Today, I would say, let's get in the car, but leave your cell phones at home. Let's enjoy the journey together. I promise you, says God, I'll get you to the promised land, but I'm not going to get you there tomorrow. Because if I do that, then our substantive relationship will never have the opportunity to incubate and to grow and to flourish. Sometimes in life there are shortcuts and sometimes there are the long ways. I would encourage you not always to look for the shortcut because you're going to miss out on life. Sometimes it's better to take a stroll hand in hand with the ones we love and allow that relationship to unfold, to progress, to naturally evolve. Says this morning's Torah reading, God chose to take us the long way. I think it's because God just wanted to spend more time with us. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
We continue with Musaf, page 100.